What is up, everybody? It is Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. And I am jacked about this conversation tonight. I've been wanting to have this conversation for a long time, but I didn't want to do it alone. So I have two outstanding Black thought leaders sharing with us tonight. Before we get to the topic, and many people already know the topic, let me introduce both of them first, as we do in tradition. Ladies first, ZaZa Ali. And the first time I saw her was, and I have to give homage to Dr. Boyce Watkins. A few weeks ago, he had Ms. Ali on his Periscope. She rocked me. I just said, I got to find a way of getting this lady on this conversation. So she's a mother, teacher, activist, radio personality, and self-published author. Her first book, entitled Black Matters, Volume 1, The Scientific Intervention in Our Affairs, was released in May 2015. Then her second book of the trilogy, Volume 2, Plagues of Dysfunction, was released last December. And we are looking forward to the third book, Lifting the Veil on Racism and White Supremacy, is set to be released in the summer of 2017. So if summer isn't hot where you are, when you pick up this book, it's gonna be hot. She's a frequent speaker on behalf of women and children. She's done extensive research on the cultural norms impacting the Black community, as well as the global dichotomy of racism and its impact on the human family. Her popular and growing presence on social media, fueled by somewhat of a controversial perspectives by some, has aided in her work to implement programs for privately owned schools, as well as provide assistance, financial assistance for women and small business owners. The message to audiences of every demographic remains the same: self-accountability and an emphasis on truth, spiritual development, and service to others is the key to revolution. And the R in the revolution is in brackets, and then there's evolution. So we'd like to welcome to the Dr. Vibe show for the first time, and hopefully not the last time, Ms. ZaZa Ali. How are you?
I am doing very well, brother. Thank you so much for having me, and peace to you, brother. I look forward to hearing your perspective and for sharing the stage with you as well.
Yeah, this is I'm very excited about this, and I must comment, love the shirt on you. That is a beautiful shirt. Wonderful. Wonderful. And another returning friend of the Dr. Vibe show, Dr. Tommy Curry. Many of you know Dr. Curry. If you don't, you're going to get to know him right quick. He is a professor of philosophy at Texas A&M University. He has appeared on many platforms ranging from Forbes to Sirius XM. He's the author of over 50 articles on issues of racism, anti-Black violence, and the institutionalism of Black male death. He is working on forthcoming books on Black male vulnerability entitled Man Not and the Eschatology of Kanye West. I hope I pronounced that word right.
Right.
Dr. Curry is a strong advocate and thinker of the reconceptualization of Black men and boys. He's adamant that arguments used to justify their death by incarceration by Black and white scholars alike must be challenged. And he is also the gentleman who has the most viewed YouTube video on the Dr. Vibe show. So I am very excited because I'm speaking that this conversation is going to break more records. Welcome, Dr. Curry. How you doing?
I'm good, sir. I'm good, sir.
Good
Thanks for the invitation.
Good to have you back. Looking forward to this great conversation. And this is the topic: are Black women leaving Black men behind? And people are going to say, Dr. Vibe, where did you come up with this conversation topic? Well, for many years, I've heard many Black women saying, we're just going to leave Black men behind because they're not stepping up, etc. So I said, okay, let's have a conversation. But as I said, I'm not going to do it alone. I'm moderating, or just I'm steering the ship while these two drive the ship. So I would love Ms. Ali to start off the conversation on this topic. So please do.
Well, it's a very interesting question. Are we leaving Black men behind? I think that, it's always interesting to me, and I talk about this in my second book, Plagues of Dysfunction, how separated some of our women are from our culture. And when I say separated from our culture, that of course means our men. I think that the question is offensive to me. I'm not even wired to process things like that. Are we leaving Black men behind? Like, what if we don't have our men, we're not going forward. So the question itself, leaves a lot to be desired. And I try to emphasize in everything that I do, for our women, even as we, deal with a lot of different issues pertaining to our men. I of course don't want to make it seem like Black women don't have a reason to be, upset with the condition of our people and the conditions of our male-female relationships. But it's very important, like you heard in my bio, self-accountability is the key to all things. And I think that unfortunately, a lot of our women are not taking self-accountability and our role in the breakdown of the Black family and our communities. So, the question itself is offensive to me, because if our men are not with us, then we are nowhere.
Dr. Curry?
I mean, I have to agree with the sister. I mean, when we talk about questions of Black female social mobility and progress, is usually done from a certain ideological perspective, which is a kind of liberal feminism. When we look at the problems that actually affect the Black community, we find Black men are unemployed and incarcerated. They have the lowest life expectancies. We find very similar conditions of Black women and Black children. So when we ask the question, are Black women leaving Black men behind? The question is, which Black women? There's certainly class into some of the higher ranks of the middle class. And in that class, there are the same class biases that we find with every Black bourgeois. Black is the increased criminalization and stereotyping of Black men, and by effect, the larger population of Black families and the mothers that raise those Black men. So even in cases of increased domestic violence, in interpersonal relationships and Black male-female consequences and conflicts, I think that there's a scapegoating that usually happens on the public sphere, which blames Black men for all ills in our community. And in doing so, we believe that all Black men are perpetrators of domestic violence. All Black men are pedophiles and sexual predators. All Black men are abusive and threats to women and children. And this narrative doesn't help build Black families. Not only is it erroneous and stereotypical, it's also false. We have bidirectional violence. Black men and Black women fight, usually because of alcoholism, drug abuse, incarceration, unemployment, depression. These are communal problems. These are problems caused by white supremacy and institutional racism. So until we start having those conversations about what's happening to the majority of Black people in this country, I think it's very damaging for us to trust the narrative that's being check-butted by white liberal organizations like the Huffington Post or Salon.com, which continue to criminalize Black men and Black families for the kinds of ills that they've been suffering because of systemic racism.
Wow. We can end the program now. No, Ms. After both of you just like bang like that, thank you so much. Ms. Ali, when I first saw you on Voice's platform, you had some very good messages or strong messages for Black women. And that's what sort of said, okay, I want to chat about this now because you bring a perspective. First of all, I'm not a Black woman. And it seems that there's some areas that you have concern for Black women when it comes to some Black women. Can you share that with our audience?
Well, yeah, it's and I get judged a lot, or I get my message gets misconstrued as if I'm trying to be the anti-Black woman cheerleader for Black men. When, of course, I am a cheerleader for Black men, but I'm also very critical of Black men as well for some of the things that need to take place in our community and some of the issues that they failed on. But, as far as us as women, I am very strong in my stance as far as our responsibility, because I know our power. I'm not doing it from a judgmental position where I'm speaking down on women. I'm doing it because I understand the power of being a woman, the power of being a Black woman, the power of being a mother. That is a very heavy responsibility. And so when we talk about mother, sometimes that that word gets limited in its definition and in its scope. We think we're talking about mothers, women who actually have children. But no, you can be a spiritual mother. You can be an emotional mother. You can be a mother to a generation of young people, whether you have children or not. And I think that this concept, like the brother said, liberal feminism now, where we have women who don't understand their connection to the collective and have this individual mindset. Well, I can do what I want to do, and you don't tell me what to do. Well, yeah, you can do what you want to do. We all have free will. But the question is, what does your behavior how does your behavior impact the larger collective, and how is it impacting our daughters? I talk a lot about, remember when the whole slut shaming fiasco was taking place and women were online talking about their right to, call themselves whatever they want and behave however they want. Well, first of all, why would you want to identify as a slut? I don't understand that concept. And then how does that impact young 10-year-olds and 15-year-olds and 21-year-olds who are trying to find their way and trying to find women to model themselves after? So there's a very selfish element that is taking place, not only within Black women, but within, a demographic of women in general. And I think that it's unfair because if you look at the condition of our daughters, the situation up in Delaware, remember the young sister who got jumped in the bathroom? One of the sisters was just found guilty. The other two sisters, they couldn't come to an agreement, the jury. But you have young girls bullying one another, beating each other up. You have young sisters killing themselves. You have girls online twerking. You have girls online being connected to pedophiles and all kind of madness. And Black women are standing back and saying, you can't tell me what to do. I think that this very individualistic and selfish mindset, it has to stop.
Dr. Tommy, you want to follow up on that?
No, I think that's just right. Listen, I have two little girls, and if you listen to the discourse that comes from the academy, the idea that I have daughters and I want to be a father to them is somehow oppressive, right? Because I don't identify as a feminist. So I definitely understand what the sister's talking about when the idea is that anytime you wage a criticism about the community or about Black women in the community or discourse that many Black women have about Black men in the community or even our families, if it doesn't come from a very specific political lens, then that's demonized. It's called anti-woman. When the real issue is, why can't we ask very simple questions about how do certain performances, how do certain discourses, how do certain actions impact not only the individual that's doing them, but the larger community and the family involved? And I think that that's the problem. If we're celebrating the idea or sex positivity without looking at the kinds of stereotypes and institutions that actually do harm to Black women, then that's a naivete on our part. It's an ignorance. Because we're suggesting that any woman has the right to be sex positive without looking at the history of the rape and violence against Black women specifically, the inability of Black men to protect families, the inability of Black men to even protect themselves, given the history of rape and sexual assault that happens in this country to Black men, especially with police. So we're looking at a community that's sexually victimized, that's terrorized by police brutality and state violence. But the only things that we concern ourselves with is whether or not we have individual performances of gender positivity, given what certain groups want to say their identity is. That's just irresponsible. And I think part of this comes along too in the terms of the conversations we've been having about the vulnerability of young Black males being killed in this country. The idea that we should somehow debate about the gender of the people being killed as if we should take attention away from all the Black men because 9 or 10 or 12 or 20 Black women have been killed overlooks the interdependence that Black men and women have to each other. When those Black men get killed, we're losing husbands, fathers, right? Potential, contributors to households, brothers. These are people that have a foundational role in the Black community. So it affects the women, it affects the children, it affects the morale of all those people that are trying to come together to protest this kind of violence. So I think that, as the sister says, we have a lot of selfishness and ideological narrowness that goes on in talking about Black people, and there's a forgetting of the collectivity. It's as if nobody wants to be Black, so let's talk about Black individuals and leave the Black community to itself because we've already abandoned that as a pathological concept.
May I say something, brother?
Absolutely. No, this is a conversation. You know how I do my thing. So I'm just steering the ship. Go ahead, Ms. Ali.
Yes, sir. I am in 100% agreement with everything the brother said. I just, want to make sure that we balance this conversation out and make sure that we're covering all spectrums. He talked about sexual victimization. Let's be clear, Black women are being sexually victimized by Black men in our communities every
Oh,
day.
absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
we have the situation with sex trafficking right now. I did we talked about the Black girls that are missing, and I did a video about it, and I talked about the fact that you have police officers up in Washington D.C. and Baltimore who are Black that are involved in high amounts of behavior that is involved in the sex trafficking industry. They are trafficking Black girls. Our girls, our daughters, 10, 15 years old, are being pimped by our men. So I think that the conversation sometimes when we talk about gender specific, the Black girls are missing now, and then we talk about the Black boys are missing. It's not that we want to emphasize one gender over another,
Oh,
but
absolutely not.
there is a disparity in how we cover, the different suffering, if you will, from genders. So I think that it's important for us to emphasize our girls are going through a certain level of suffering. Our boys are going through a certain level of suffering. They both deserve equal attention. And I think that, when you look at situations like what happened up in DC, this is not a new, it's not new.
Oh, absolutely
And
not.
there are so many girls across this country that are going missing every single day, and they're being sold all across the world. So I think that the outcry was needed in that moment, because, and it's still needed. It's needed every day, because our daughters are they're suffering a state of emergency. At the same
Mhm.
time, our sons, the situation with Khalif Browder. I mean, this case and this documentary has just totally consumed me since I found
Mhm.
out about it, that we have a young brother that was incarcerated in Rikers Island for 3 years and just tortured beyond belief by, I couldn't believe how many of the officers were Black.
Yeah.
Then you got a Black judge. Then you got a Black district attorney. I'm watching and I'm like, please, I don't let me see another Black face again, please. Like, it's already hard enough to deal with. So I just, the dichotomy of what's happening in our male-female relationships, and how women are dropping the ball on our sons. Women don't want to discuss the prison industrial complex and what's happening on our men. Our men are dropping the ball as far as what's protecting our daughters in our communities. I think we got to kind of, come into the middle and really give this thing the proper nurturing and attention that it deserves.
Oh, I completely agree. I completely agree. A lot of the work that I do is looking actually at the victimization of young Black men and boys in our community, sexual victimization and rape. So by no stretch of imagination is it lost to me that we have tremendous problems of sexual abuse, rape of Black girls and Black boys. But as you said, when we talk about these issues, they're usually framed as one-sided, right? We don't have very many conversations or even shelters or ways to talk about young Black boys not only being raped by Black women, but other Black men. Our community doesn't do a very good job of discussing these kinds of issues. So I agree with you 100%. But I think that the way that we're framing in the larger discussion, right, we don't get that kind of nuance. We don't get that we're dropping the ball in this segment and we're dropping the ball in this segment concerning both groups. What we get is a narrative that's supported by liberal media organizations that demonize Black men within a super predator narrative, as if they're responsible for all ills of the community. And when I was pointing to the police brutality, that wasn't to say that we shouldn't be focusing on our women. I would never say that. But it is to say that there is an agenda that's being pushed by the mainstream media, which tries to separate the impact that something like Ayanna Stanley has, the impact of losing that daughter because they had a no-knock raid looking for the father and the uncle to accuse them of murder, and then the ways that we're just systematically taking Black men out of the communities. When James Stewart coined the term institutional decimation, it wasn't just about Black men's bodies. It was about the effect that would have on the economic and the familial structure of Black communities all across the nation. And I think that the Black family has to be rediscussed and reimagined when we're focusing on this, because this is not something that exclusively just affects one gender. When we're talking about incarceration, Black women are incarcerated, usually for drug offenses. We're talking about high rates of homicide. Black women have higher rates of homicide than the other women. But when you talk about Black men, you're talking about 5-6 times that. You're talking about 5,000-6,000 Black men dying per year. So we share in each other's oppression. We share in each other's victimization. But what we're not doing is having a real discussion about what that means and what those deaths mean for the larger community.
Absolutely.
As you see, folks, I'm just letting them do their thing. This is good stuff. I'm just gonna come in here and gonna shout out to a number of people that are joining the conversation. Tish, Minnie, there's Leon from England. Ryan, thanks for stopping by. Thanks Gemini Blue for stopping by. Leon from England has a question for both of you, asking, what do you think about the increasing Black women online groups that do not include Black males?
Well, include as far as what? Include as far as them being a member, or include as far as discussing issues that are pertaining to Black men?
Okay, I will ask, I know Leon is watching. If you can clarify that, Leon, that would be great. I'm going to...
And I asked because I have an online group that is specifically for Black women. It's called the Sister Cipher. And it is just a place where women, we come together and, share stories, share information. We have a support group where we, financially support other women. So I want to, kind of get clarity on what he's asking.
Understood. Well, I've got there's someone else who has a question for you, or a comment for you, Ms. Ali. Ryan is saying you are taking a very heteronormative view of sexual abuse. I have never heard that word before. Maybe you have.
No.
I don't know. So Ryan, okay, Leon has followed up in regards to his question. He's saying both. So in regards to the online communities, he's saying his question is, Black women online groups that do not include Black males. So do you understand what he means in his follow-up by saying both? Because I know you wanted some clarification.
Well, I think that Black women should have spaces online where we discuss issues pertaining to Black women. I think Black men should have spaces online where it's just a conversation amongst Black men. I think we should have collective spaces where we all come together and talk. I don't see any issue. Only time I have a problem is when either side of the coin tries to, use a bully pulpit, if you will, to talk down and degrade and dismiss the other. That's the only issue that I have. We have to be critical of our communities, of ourselves, of, one another with righteous, with a righteous eye in order to try to get, some sort of balance. But yeah, I'm not with the tearing down and disrespect.
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing. If I can follow real quick, I think it's important for Black women to have spaces for themselves, because Black women have different issues and experiences from how Black men think about things. There's nothing, in the academy, I just have a problem with this intellectual silliness, right? For Black women to talk about issues, the way they experience motherhood or discrimination or poverty, et cetera, or how they experience the loss of family members given the high rates of homicide and death in their communities, that's something that Black women need to discuss amongst themselves, because they're dealing with it as women. The same way that Black men need spaces to talk about themselves. I mean, as we've talked about before, one of the perks or the positive things about your show is that it's a space where Black men have a social media outlet to talk about Black male vulnerability, to talk about Black male death, to talk about Black male unemployment and depression. That's all important. But those things do not have to compete with each other. The idea that we should be so distrustful of each other that any conversation or criticism about that Black men have a Black women or Black women have a Black men, that somehow leads to the destruction of our communities and interpersonal relationships is just silly. Now, I do know that there are online spaces that are built on the negativity towards other groups. And, those are the things that I can't co-sign on, right? If it's one thing for Black men to say, listen, here's the problems, here's the kinds of abuses, here's the violence, here's the neglect that we face in the hands of Black women. It's another thing to say all Black women are X, and hence that's not positive. That doesn't bring about any kind of healing or conversation between Black men and women in the community or within families. That's the type of thing that tears us down, because what it allows is criticism and interpersonal conflict to become pathological accounts of how we start describing other members in our community. So while we have things that we have to discuss and issues we may have between each other, pathologizing each other is not the answer.
Thank you both for covering that. Leon says, Ms. Ali, you covered his answer perfectly. So he's very pleased. Now, just following up with Ryan, he's saying, so if you look at the prevalence of sexual violence in the United States, we see that men and women are reporting similar levels of sexual violence. And then he follows up here. If we look at the subgroup differences in sexual violence, CDC data suggests rising rates of sexual abuse among non-same-sex couples. In short, Men abuse women, or men abuse men, women abuse women. So he just following up with that. I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, there are similar rates. I actually researched this area. So especially in Black communities, there are similar rates of sexual abuse within same-sex couples. Um, and when we look specifically, when you look at boys, young boys, between the ages of before they really hit puberty or teenage, you do see that they have similar risk to be sexually abused by men just as much as women. But that's what I'm saying. This is an issue that's across our community that actually correlates very well with lower socioeconomic status and poverty. So while it's there, it's not something that's unique to Black people.
Well, and let me just chime in on that.
Yeah.
As it's one thing to say that the statistics are similar, and I'm not privy to what exactly those statistics are, but the number of same-sex people who identify as same-sex, if you will, opposed to those who identify heterosexual, are very different. So if we're going to compare them, we have to look at the numbers side by side. Okay, if it's a 20% in this community and 20% in that community that are experiencing sexual violence. But if this community has, 2 million and this community has 20,000, that's a very large disparity. So I understand, the conversation he's trying to frame, but that's like, and when we talk about Black men and statistics, and we always say Black male, Blacks and Latinos, they always throw that out there, right? But it's like, yeah, Latinos are being incarcerated, but the number of Black men who are in prison highly outweighs the number of Latinos. So, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Anything you want to add before we move on, Dr. Curry, to what was said by Ms. Ali?
No. I just think that when we discuss these issues, we have to do it with a sense of compassion, right? So, what we're talking about are young girls who are being raped in our communities by Black men and Black women. We're talking about young boys who are raped by Black men and Black women. So while the statistics are helpful to talk about the prevalence of this in our communities, ultimately it's a question of what we decide to do and how we want to interpret that, right? If we choose to say that this just means that Black people are sexual predators, which has been a very common conversation, at least when we talk about Black males, that's not helpful for us understanding the dynamic, right? We have to talk about previous experiences of violence. Was this young man or young woman abused when they were children? Did they witness domestic abuse as children? Are they victims of substance or alcohol abuse, right? These are all questions that we have to ask before we get to the initial act of statutory rape, or other types of abuse or violence.
Okay. I'll just follow up with some things that Ryan has put in the chat room on the side. And look, I'd like to thank everybody who's watching live and all the comments. There are a lot of comments going down. Please feel free to add your comments if you have any questions of our panelists. They are here to answer and share. Ryan says, agreed, but sexual violence is engendered. Rarely do we discuss sexual violence in same-sex communities or cases when women abuse men. Right? I'm a sociologist by training. We see rates of sexual abuse among same-sex couples. It's a rising trend. Okay. I want to get back into our main line of conversation about the whole the topic about are Black women leaving Black men behind. When I'm out there, I'm hearing more women say this, and you know what? Can't deal with Black brothers. They're this, that, and that. And also what's compounding is Black women are moving ahead quicker and faster economically than Black men. And I've had Black women say to me, well, you know what? They ain't worthy. They're not moving ahead. That's why I came up with the title. Are they leaving behind? Because I'm hearing more and more Black women saying they're leaving Black men behind.
Well, it's funny. So I'm going to address your question, right?
Yep.
This particular subject, because it's the lack of discernment that people have nowadays. It's really unfortunate. The conversation will get panned as we did a whole show jumping on Black women, right? So we are addressing the topic of the show is, are Black women leaving Black men behind? We're addressing a specific subject matter here. It's funny because, you say Black women hear this all the time, but I have Black men contacting me all around the world saying that they can't find Black women that are of substance.
Interesting.
They can't.
And I hear that too. I will say I hear both sides of the coin, but I hear it more right now from Black women. But I hear what you're saying. I fully hear what you're saying.
Yeah, so I said, and I say this all the time. Isn't it ironic that we as Black women have made so many advances in the society as far as the corporate and educational factors, but as a collective, our men don't respect us. What is that about? Now, I'm not saying that we don't have individual brothers such as yourself that are out here, riding for us as women and providing platforms and doing what needs to be done to support women. But there is a very high amount of disrespect that is coming towards us as women by our own brothers. And some of it's, ignorance and nonsense, just like the feminist liberalism, if you will. But there's another conversation that needs to be had about, well, why is it that our men lack the amount of respect for us that they should have? So men come to me and say, my children's mother, I'm trying to change the way that they eat. I'm trying to get them to start reading books that are culturally acclimated. And I can't get her to get involved to help me to raise my daughter or to help me to raise my son the way that I'm trying to raise them. I have so many brothers who have issues with raising children and trying to get their women or the children's mother on the same accord to raise that child in a more healthy and balanced manner. It's one thing to talk about economic independence. It's one thing to talk about being economically further than Black men, but that's only one piece of the pie. How are we as women emotionally? How are we spiritually? How are we mentally? And I'm not talking about what you got in your degree and what you learned when you were in those institutions. I'm talking about how you fine tune your mind, your ability to seek knowledge and to be able to teach the men in our lives, not just our husbands or boyfriends, but our uncles and our cousins and our fathers and our grandfathers. Do we as women actually have enough substance in us to be able to raise up a nation? So it's very limited to just address this as far, I make $80,000 a year or I make $150,000 a year and I can't find a man that's on the same accord as me. Well, that's only one part of the conversation. And if you only qualify yourself based on the amount of money that you have, then you're poor anyway.
Dr. Tommy?
I mean, well, look, I think this is a complicated question, right? Precisely because what Miss Ali said, there is a growing economic gap between middle class, college educated Black women in this country and Black men who would make up that same group. Black women get about 70% of the degrees across the board, from associate all the way up to JD, PhD. So if the conversation is following from online, blog sources, the Black feminist blogosphere, Black Twitter, then their perspective is going to be this kind of pathologization of working class Black men as being lazy, not worthy, disrespectful, violent, etc. If on the other hand, we're looking at Black communities, then I think that what you see is that there's much more cultural and economic parity, where the issues between them are the results of a kind of psychological and institutional warfare and attack on them because of white supremacy. The idea that Black men and Black women don't like each other is not new. It's been documented in American social science at least since the 1930s. This is a function in that time of segregation. After we end segregation and we find the absolute downward mobility of Black men and some of the increased education and economic and employment opportunities for Black women, you see increases or a reverse of domestic violence and broken marriages and families in our communities. So these problems result not just from an innate conflict that Black men and Black women have with each other. It is not natural for Black men and Black women to hate each other. These are environmental problems that are created by the sociology and political circumstance that they find each other in. Now, having said that, it does mean that there is a tremendous amount of disrespect, of anti-Black woman sentiment in some spaces, the same way that there's a large amount of disrespect, pathologization, and anti-Black male sentiment. The problem is that when these things take on a public and social media front all to themselves, that what we have are people that take sides in that debate without analyzing or understanding the condition that these individuals find themselves in. And that becomes the problem. that when we talk about how we address black men or black women understanding or trying to move or progress with each other, there's a fundamental gap or distance between whether or not these people see themselves as natural pairs, natural mates, or even natural allies in the fight against racism and white supremacy. So the first thing we have to do is talk about the conflict resolution and mental health of black people that are making these kinds of statements that fundamentally believe that the women or men in their communities are their enemies rather than their allies.
Yeah, and let me say something, brother. You know, I love black men. Let's just, you know what I mean? Like when I heard you say, you know, black men and black women don't like each other, and I trust me, I'm in the middle of this whole
Sure.
from all sides. So I'm like, oh my God, this is madness. But I love black men. And I know that there are a lot of brothers who love us as women.
Absolutely.
And there are a lot of women who love black men, you know,
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's important for us to underscore that if the vitriol and the issues that we have, you know, black men attacking black women and black women attacking black women, that's a form of self-hatred.
Absolutely.
The way that you as a woman who are confident within yourself, who loves your culture, who understands the chronological order of what we've been through. You know, slavery was just one aspect of our history. You know what I mean? Prior to that, we had matriarchal societies, and we were ruling the planet based on a concept of ma'at: balance, reciprocity, justice, and harmony. So we didn't have this craziness that we have right now. So I think it's important for us to underscore that even though we are in the thick of, you know, of trying to work it out now, we have to understand that we are suffering various levels of self-hatred. So
absolutely.
Black men are comfortable and confident in themselves. A brother who is confident in himself and who is a real man, and I'm emphasizing the quotations, is not going to be spending his time on social media attacking black women.
Right.
Period. And vice versa with women. So when we see these type of things, opposed to us sometimes fanning the flames and jumping in and even paying this stuff attention, we have to say, okay, this is a form of self-hatred. You know, Dr. Joy DeGruy talks about post-traumatic slave syndrome. You know, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, the ISIS papers. I mean, you know, Dr. Amos Wilson, they've all attached or approached the self-hatred dichotomy that's affecting our people. And I think that's really what's at the root of the breakdown of the male-female relationships.
Absolutely. And I think, and a furthermore point though, is that there are a lot of successful black relationships and families,
Absolutely.
right? So that's what I'm saying is that this is a minority of black relationships that we see in this way, but they take up the majority of the attention in the social space because that's what people focus on. People historically have focused on the pathology and the conflict within black people, not the loving relationships and the sacrifices that black men, black women, and black communities make for each other. That being said, I think you're right that this is a form of self-hatred, right? This is internalized racism. The problem with that is that the people who get the mic more often than not, the people you're going to see on MSNBC, the people that the white liberal media like to put out as the spokesperson on the race and black relationships and love, are people who've internalized that narrative as well. That you have people that are now, you know, that are, I mean, just with, you know, the unfortunate death of the brother who killed his wife and a few students in D.C. I mean, you have, you know, piece after piece saying that black men are hyper masculine, danger to women. Who's going to come to our communities and save black women, right? That's not an articulation of actual facts about intimate partner violence and homicide or depression and mental illness in our communities. That is a narrative that is perpetuated by very specific white liberal media that allows certain voices to come in and yet again say that black people need help, black people need to be intervened, black women are victims, be afraid of their men, black men are criminals, predators, etc. That problem is something that white people have historically been able to latch onto and justify various policies, treatments, and different theories, which still believe that black culture, specifically black males, are savage and dangerous to the people in their communities. So I completely agree with you, sister, but there's also this kind of institutional and media flaming of how we should interpret and then describe black people, especially black males in this society.
Wow. Okay. You guys are just, the chat room is blowing up. Just want to tell you, the
I
chat
bet
room
it
is,
is.
is blowing up, and I'm going to pick selected comments, and I can't get them all in because we're coming to the top of the hour real quick. So just some things here. Gemini Blue, I think there should be more support for retreats like ZaZa has for children. That's one step at building relationships and giving them a different perspective about life. Ryan says again, CDC data suggests that black men have similar, if not higher, levels of parental involvement as whites or Latinos. Let me
We're better
just
at fathering. We're better at communal
yes.
fathering.
Let me just. Brian Love is saying here, we refuse to talk about affirmative action in black women. Does this not account for why black women are ahead? What are your thoughts
Yeah.
on that point?
If it depends the time period you're talking about, right? So if you're talking about the late 1970s, early 1980s, then yes, there was a depression of black male jobs and the hiring of black women, largely because black women historically have been more educated than black men in this country. The question that you would have to ask is, did that employment substantially increase the wealth that black women enjoyed? And the answer to that question is no. So while black women do have higher levels of employment, depending on the class, so if you're talking about middle class women, they'll have a higher level of income, but not necessarily communal wealth. And that's been the problem, that while black men suffer high levels of unemployment, depression, incarceration, the education of black women as a whole hasn't increased the amount of wealth that the community enjoys, despite, say, 9% or so of black women enjoying incomes that are practically equal to that of white women.
I mean, I think that, can you hear me, brother? I know my screen is stuck.
No,
Yeah, I
we
can hear
can
you.
we can hear you.
I think that affirmative action may have had some bearing as far as women being able to make some advancements. But, I kind of cringe every time I hear that because let's be clear, there are a lot of black women who are, busting their behinds, you know what I mean? Going to school, working hard, doing everything that they're supposed to do in order to get ahead. We don't have sisters that are just sliding in, based on some little boost. And, affirmative action might get you in college per se. It's not going to help you graduate. It's not going to give you any assistance as far as going out and actually getting the job and then keeping the job and then making advancements in the corporate world. So while their statistics show that there have been some gains as far as affirmative action is concerned, black women struggle with a lot of other things in their lives that make their lives just as hard as if they hadn't, experienced a gain from affirmative action. Women, tend to be single mothers, tend to lack support in the community as far as the family structure and things like that. So, I don't know. Affirmative action is due. Number one, they owe us, a check that
At least that, right?
You know what I'm saying? So if women are getting affirmative action, they should get affirmative action. I think the issue is that, of course, brothers are not, should be getting it equally and more. And then what they're giving is nowhere near what we should be receiving.
And the larger problem to that, too, is that white women have disproportionately benefited, right? So
Exactly.
it's, and this is the problem that I have with how people try to tell the narrative of the civil rights movement. The idea is that somehow black power and civil rights was all male run, that these people were in their own interest. But immediately after civil rights and you got affirmative action and executive orders in 72, you had the proliferation of policy and hiring initiatives that disproportionately benefited white women. It wasn't black women that got all the jobs, right? Black women did get a disproportionate amount compared to black men, but that's apples and oranges compared to how white women benefited from a civil rights movement built on race, which basically were off the backs of black women's organization and the blood of black men's lives. So we have to be very specific about what we're talking about, right? That black women have some economic advantages in terms of employment and education, but that is not the overarching dynamic that's hurting black men. The overarching dynamic that's hurting black men is institutional racism, the inability for them to get jobs, and white women dominating those jobs and those slots that should have been allocated to black people as a whole. So we have to be, it's a yes, but kind of analysis. You have the arching dynamic, not just the specifics.
Yeah.
Well, just adding to both your commentaries there, Tachi says that it's not the whole picture, the whole affirmative action thing, saying that discounts like the whole affirmative action, saying that discounts well-deserved accomplishments of black women. There's a question here from Brian Love for Ms. Ali. What is a real man?
When I said that, I did the quotation because I knew in my mind as I was saying it that it was going to set off bells and whistles. I mean, I think that a real man is a man that is trying to be his best self. And so that's not going to, look like any certain particular type of thing. You could be in the hood, you know what I mean, working at, McDonald's and trying to put your best foot forward. You could be in college, getting affirmative action or, having a scholarship, eating, air sandwiches at lunchtime, trying to put your best foot forward. You can be in the corporate world and, focusing on staying true to yourself and not letting that racist system break you. You could be brothers like you, individual brothers who are, striving to move forward and make progress in their own individual lives. That term, it's broad and it's far reaching, but I would say, I would explain it in one way for fatherhood. I would explain it in one way for a husband. I would explain it in one way for, a man in the business field. So to minimize that, I would say a man that is striving to put his best foot forward and to be his highest self.
Okay. No problem. That is good. Just looking, like I said, it's like picking, don't know which comments to pick with the time that's running out here. So I just, okay, let me just see here. Let me just pick something out. Here's another comment by Brian saying he believes that affirmative action is the reason why black women do better than black men. I don't know if I agree with that one.
Well, this is what I'm saying. It's relative. Like, every black woman that gets a job is not getting a job because of affirmative action, right? Historically, black women have been more educated. So when the economy changed in the late 70s and 80s, black women fit those slots better than black men who had traditionally been laborers. So that's why you had a huge increase in unemployment, and you had the drug war, which incarcerated millions, hundreds of thousands of black men. So does affirmative action have an effect on that? Yes. Where he would see the biggest difference is not going to be just in society, but specifically in middle-class jobs like the academy or, corporations, things like that. Now, in that situation, black men often end up being the bottom candidates just because of stereotypes they hold of black men in relationship to black women. But again, when you're talking about that, you're talking about 3 to 5% of the whole black population. So that does not hold across the board for all black people.
Okay. Good stuff. And it's a question for both of you here from Tachi saying, how does personal responsibility factor into this phenomenon?
Which phenomenon?
I think, Tachi, are you addressing the conversation piece in regards to black women leaving black men behind? I think that's what she's commenting on. She would like to know about personal responsibility. How does that, if at all, factor into this situation or alleged situation?
Well, personal responsibility is everything. So if we apply personal responsibility, then let's use personal responsibility as the litmus test for the conversation, right? How does, if the person who just asked the question, and his name escapes me, I'm assuming it was a brother, who said that they believe that affirmative action is the reason that black women are ahead.
Brian.
Well, how does personal responsibility account for black men in a comment like that? You know what I mean? It's like, and I've said this, since the beginning of the conversation, that we as women have to accept accountability for, ourselves first. And I say that, it's interesting that we, from the civil rights movement up until now, and even prior to that, I think that that concept of self-responsibility, self-accountability, we've been so busy digging in the trenches and trying to fight wars on our fronts that I think as a collective, that conversation has kind of gotten left off the table. And I think that's one of the missing pieces as to why we haven't made as much progress as we need to. So there's a collective conversation for women. We as women need to do A, B, C, D. We need to heal. We need to do this. And then there's an individual conversation for me as a woman There's a collective conversation for men as far as what needs to take place to get control of our sons and to help our sons to heal, as well as help our men to heal. And then there's an individual conversation for brothers on an individual basis. It all starts with us. And I constantly say that, we've been trying to build institutions on the backs of broken people. And this is why we are limited in the scope of how we are moving forward. So I think that we need to approach it from I say all the time, emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical. Every single day, each of us as individuals need to approach those four things. Now, some people would say, well, what about economics? If you are mentally and spiritually and emotionally and physically sound, those four things, there's no way that you cannot be successful. There's no way that you are not moving in the world and attracting the type of people, attracting the type of opportunities that you need to attract. The problem is a lot of us are going after economics and neglecting the emotional well-being, neglecting the spiritual well-being, neglecting ourselves physically, neglecting the mental well-being. So I think that those four things, if we, all of us as individuals, approach those and then moved in our communities and made those prime factors in how we govern ourselves, I think that would take us a long way.
Dr. Curry, want to add to that?
Yeah. I don't know what the poster was really trying to get at in terms of, are people making choices that ultimately cause relationships or them to fail in life? So I'm kind of two minds about that. I think personal responsibility is important. We have to have individuals that have the courage and the will to kind of, go beyond their circumstance or what they've been indoctrinated within with society. So I certainly think that's important. On the other hand, we have to also consider the ways that certain institutional aspects of white supremacy limit what people see as possibilities. So if the idea is that we can simply decide, right, to not be oppressed, then I think that's a flawed concept. If it's a kind of a Nigerian myth that we could just all pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, I think that overlooks that there's very real institutional racism in this country. On the other hand, I think, I'll give you a brief example. In a lot of the studies about middle class educated Black people, especially males, this disproportionately affects males, but it affects all Black people. There's this looming question about what happens when you've checked all the boxes, when you got the same education that your white counterpart has, and you still can't get a job, right? What kind of toll does that play on the psychology of Black people who took up personal responsibility? And that's not to say that we shouldn't, but that's to suggest that the consequences in a society that's fundamentally anti-Black still will have consequences beyond what we decide to do. So when we're having these conversations about personal responsibility, we also have to have a conversation about depression, disappointment, and the realities that we're confronting as a community, as individual Black people.
Okay. As Ms. Ali was nodding her head on that, I believe you approve of that statement? Okay, good stuff.
Got 2 thumbs up.
That's excellent. Let me see what else we got on in the chat room. Wilford is saying a major problem is not male or female. We have problems ingrained in us that we must fix. He would like your response on that comment. Agreed? Don't agree? Or would you like...
It's so general. I don't know what the problems are. Yes, do Black people as individuals in a white supremacist society where most of us grow up impoverished are still first or second generation? Yes, of course we have problems. We can test it. We know even through interviews that we suffer often, especially Black men and boys, suffer from high levels of depression. We know sisters often have increased allostatic load, we know that. So yes, there are problems that need to be fixed. To suggest, however, that that's the foundational problem of Black people in this country, I'm much more suspicious of. Here's my bottom line. I simply don't believe that Black men and Black women are pathological. Okay? I do not believe that when you look at the interactions between Black men and Black women, when you look at the histories that we've created to fight against racism and white supremacy, when the kinds of alliances that we formed on different forms of abuse and violence against women and against men throughout the centuries, that this is something that simply goes away in the last decade or last 2 or 3 decades because we have a case of amnesia. I think the reality is that we've had certain kinds of violences and political orientations that have in many ways blinded us to the at-large history of what Black people have done in the United States and abroad. And given that kind of collective forgetting, that's put us in a situation where we more likely pathologize each other rather than understanding kind of the historical context by which all these things emerge.
Well, he's right. It is a very broad question, so I'm going to freestyle
Nope.
and
Okay,
just
go ahead.
say, I don't know. I think that Black people are just the most beautiful, you know what I mean, amazing, just wonderful creation of God, and I particularly, our people in America, and I don't say that to discount our people anywhere in the world, but because I know that the Black experience in America has cultivated a certain type of mind and a certain type of heart, and we could see the impact that our people here are having across the world. So it really can't be questioned. I just think that we need to take power over. I wrote a post on Facebook and talked about the power in the deficit. We need to recognize the power in the deficit of what we've been through. And when I say deficit, I mean, being the have-nots, coming up, dealing with institutional racism, living in poverty, being miseducated in the school system, being miseducated again in the collegiate system. Once you recognize it, once you're able to actually see it through your third eye, if you will, it puts you in a different frame of mind. So I'm in a different frame of mind right now. Racism, white supremacy has no power over me. It doesn't mean that I am not impacted as I go out into the world and may interact with a police officer or may come across, a situation where I'm being not denied a bank loan, or may come across somebody with a snooty attitude when I'm in a store. Absolutely. I deal with things like that on a daily basis. But as far as me as a sovereign being, racism, white supremacy has no power over me. And when I deal with those things, I navigate them accordingly based on me having a divine connection to the Creator. So I think that for us as a people, while my third book is called Lifting the Veil on Racism, White Supremacy. I'm an avid student of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. So I know that racism, white supremacy as an institution is the bane of all existence on this planet. And not just, us as a people, the earth, you know what I'm saying? The natural resources, the environment, the air, the water, chemtrails, geoengineering, all of these different things. But for me as a sovereign being, once I look back and step back and look at it, so they have to control the natural resources. They have to create debt, financial debt across the world, keep all of these different people mentally and spiritually enslaved. They have to have military bases in every country around the world in order to try to control those populations. They have to use the prison industrial complex and the education. They work so hard to keep control. They put so much money and so much effort and so much energy into keeping other people down. What do we have to do? All we have to do is eat right, think right, study, put our best foot forward, work hardest in whether you in the hood or whether you come from a middle class background or upper middle class background. Once you have a proper understanding of yourself and who you are and embrace that Blackness, embrace that culture, embrace that history, nobody else would have been able to make it through what we've been through. From lynching to Jim Crow to the civil rights movements to slavery. I mean, you're talking about 300 plus years of a people being completely broken and taken of everything that exists, that makes you a human being. And look at us now. We're on Skype right now having this conversation, being of sound mind, being able to teach our people, being able to write books, being able to lead in pop culture, in sports, in different aspects of economics, in different aspects of education. So I don't have a victim mentality. I'm looking at racism, white supremacy, and trying to figure out what I can do to destroy it.
Well said. Well said. I know our time is running down, but there was a question on my Twitter feed that I would like to get both of you to talk about. It's indirect, revolves around our conversation. But the question is from Dr. Lawrence Rashid, and who was a big fan of Dr. Curry's, by the way, huge fan. He probably knows who he is, but
I do.
yes, and he does say also, please let Dr. Curry know his brother on the left is going to get him out to the Bay soon. And shout out to my sister. So he's a big fan of both of you. But he has a question saying, what are your thoughts on black male mentoring programs only for single black mothers?
Well, there's lots of thoughts I could have about that. I think mentoring programs for black men are good and needed, especially young black boys. Given the literature, absolutely. If you come from certain communities, and this is not to take away from the idea that or what we know happens in many communities where black men are absent, there are other men who fill in that role. Sarah McDougall did a really good research piece on social fathering that is just, it's amazing how resilient our communities are given what happens to us. So not shying away from that, but I think that, yeah, especially they would be good. I think that when you're talking about single motherhood, you're also talking about, you're talking about other conditions of economic deprivation and usually more than one dependent. So I think that it would be good. I think more importantly, role models, ways to talk about early signs of depression, social environments, all those things could only help, given what the obstacles that we know young black boys face in America.
Ms. Ali?
Well, black male mentoring programs for single black mothers, I'm assuming that he's alluding to men coming in and teaching the children of single black mothers, or are they saying that there should be programs where single mothers are mentoring black males?
Yeah, I think what Dr. Rashid is saying, and correct me, Dr. Rashid, if I'm not right, is about young black boys mentoring programs that are addressed towards single black mothers. So they're getting mentoring programs for young black boys.
Well, yeah.
So for their sons, right?
Yeah, for their sons.
I definitely think that we should have brothers who are participating in the lives of those children that are, in a household where there's only a woman. Sisters are doing okay as far as motherhood is concerned. Yeah, we have some bad apples. But I think that, if we're going to talk about women teaching women about motherhood, which we definitely need, that's one thing. But I know for a fact, because of my work with young brothers, a lot of the issues that a lot of our sons and daughters have is because they have a lack of strong, commanding and consistent black male energy in their lives. So it's definitely needed.
Okay. Well, we are coming to the end of this epic conversation, and it has been epic because anyone looking in the comments section of this, it has just been, especially one individual has had a lot of attention in regards to comments this evening. But before we wind it down, I'd like to get some final comments in regards to this conversation, and if there's any calls to action in regards to it that either one of you would like to recommend, suggest. So again, I'd like to go to our astute Ms. Ali first.
Well, yes. First, my website is www.ZaZaAli.com. You can get connected to all of my social media sites. My books are available for purchase there. You can also go to the contact page and send me an email if you want to, comment on anything that I've said or join my mailing list. I'm going to be in Atlanta this Saturday with Dr. Boyce Watkins. I'll be speaking at the Shrine of the Black Madonna on Saturdays at 7:30 p.m. You can go to my site and hit me up if you need more information for that, because I don't have the direct link to the site for tickets. But come out, let me meet you, and you can purchase my book or just get a feel for what's happening here in Atlanta. I'm all about accountability right now, and I know and understand that we are living in a very trying time. People are afraid. We already had issues prior to Donald Trump coming in office, and now that he's in office, like the Antichrist, has reared his ugly head, and everybody's like, now we have a real point, a real physical, place where we can point to and say, see, that right there is the epitome of everything that we have been complaining about for the past 100 years, and everybody has been saying, no, you're lying, stop complaining. You have so many benefits. Black people have, in America have more than anybody in the world. What are you complaining about? Look at Donald Trump. And that is a perfect representation of what we've been complaining about. At the same time, I was having a conversation with a friend earlier today. We were talking about just from a business perspective. See, we got to look at this glass as half full. So from a business perspective right now, if you're watching Donald Trump and the moves that he's making, I think that this is going to be a good time for people who are interested in moving themselves forward from an economic perspective. If you have a business mind, so looking at it from that perspective, and just, for us as a people to start having a more sovereign type of mindset, buying Black, and not just when I say buy Black, it's so cliche for people to say that, but the reality is that we don't produce the type of things that we really need every single day, like tissue and, socks and T-shirts and things like that. Those are the type of things that we need to start thinking outside of the box and having ingenuity to start creating the things that we really need. But your plumber, your real estate agent, the person who cuts your grass, the person who comes and does the little things in your house that have to be fixed, the people who tutor your children, there's a lot of different service-oriented businesses that we can support. I definitely think that's one way to go. And then just from an individual perspective, find your niche, your thing that you're good at. So I'm a writer, right? I'm a teacher. So I know what my thing is. I'm using my thing to be able to go out and uplift my people. What is your niche? Go into that thing and master it, and then take it back and give it to our people.
One other thing I wanted to just add on to that too, Ms. Ali, what message do you have to Black men? And then what message do you have to Black women? Is that the same message you just gave, or is there something you'd like to add on to each one of those groups?
Well, for Black women, my book that's out now, I think probably more than a third of the book is dealing directly with Black women. I sometimes get really disappointed at the level of conversation that we're having. There's so many things that are happening in our communities. There's so many things that are happening in the world. And sometimes we get stuck on this very surface vanity type level where we're only talking about what's happening on Instagram. And, now there's this culture of social media models and whatnot. And, I just want us as women to be inspired by being intelligent, be inspired by reading, be inspired by being, culturally acclimated as far as, Black history and who we are as a people and where we've been and what we've been through. Be knowledgeable about what our Black men are going through. Be knowledgeable about the prison industrial complex. Be knowledgeable about what happened to Black men during the slavery process, because we can see some of the ills that they're facing right now. We can pinpoint it back to what's happened to them historically. I think that will help us to develop empathy in order to be able to better relate with our men. And I'm not just talking about men that you date. I'm not just talking about men that you have relationships with or that you marry. I think that's a very limited perspective that we have. I'm talking about Black men in general, the men we come in contact with on a day-to-day basis. We have a responsibility to help, not only to communicate with them in a righteous sense, but also to help them heal from a lot of the problems that they're facing. And then for brothers, I think it's time for Black men to really step up to the plate. We can't just talk about Black girls going missing and Black girls being sex trafficked, and then we don't see a strong show of force from Black men, if indeed it is your responsibility, and it is, to protect and to provide and to secure our communities, to secure our children and to secure our women. We need to see your presence in these communities. We need to see you lifting up your voice and accepting responsibility for leading us forward. I don't have a problem with, this conversation, well, Black men don't have to lead. Why do men? I won't have a problem with being led and being guided by Black men. We want your leadership. We want your guidance, but we are not going to be led in some foolishness just because you are a man. We need strong, beautiful, powerful, righteous representations of manhood, as we see on this show, to help us to move this thing forward.
Wonderful. And I've been told to remind you to talk about your GoFundMe retreat.
That must be Gemini Blue.
Yes, it is. Is Gemini your PR agent?
No, Gemini is not. Gemini is one of my people that
I
ride
know.
with me and always have my back. I'm so horrible at promoting myself. I'm horrible at this, but I have a GoFundMe that I've set up, a fundraising campaign. I work with some organizations back home in Oakland, California, and I've worked in the juvenile detention center where I'm basically trying to set up retreats, nature and knowledge-based retreats, where I can go back into the hood and take some of these brothers and sisters, take them up to Lake Tahoe in California, for instance, here in Atlanta and New York and a couple of different places that I've identified that I have a strong following in. Take these brothers and sisters out of the concrete jungle, the ones that we don't want to deal with, the Khalid Browders of the world, and take them for 3 or 4 days into a knowledge and a nature-based environment and talk about what we're talking about now, and just let them know as a woman that I love them, that I am here to assist them and to serve them and to give them a higher and righteous, balanced perspective of themselves and how to navigate the things that they deal with in their lives. Thank you, Gemini Blue. So you can get that. It's on my website. I have a page called Help Me, Help Us. You can go to my website, ZaZaAli.com, and get the information there.
And final words and contact information for Dr. Curry.
So first you could get me on Twitter at Dr. TJC. Or email me at tjcurry@tamu.edu. I would say that Black people have to learn to not fear each other. I think that the dominant discourses we have today assume violence and kind of malice on the part of what black men's disposition to Black women and Black women's disposition to Black men. And it's hard for me to disconnect this from a lot of theorists and just kind of the news, outlets that go on in this country. I feel as if, and I think that we can reasonably demonstrate this, that there is a vicious attack on the image of Black people in America. And what ends up happening is we take the worst elements that are in the minority of our people, right? The Black men who are domestic abusers, the Black men who have committed rape, and that represents them all. That becomes the position from which we begin conversations about what it is for a Black man to be. So I think that means that we have a two-tone problem. One is we have to get Black men to understand that's not who they really are. And then we have to get Black women to not fear and buy into the ideological propaganda that the society is giving them about these men. On the flip side, I think that we have a history of exploiting Black women. And I think that it's very easy for Black men to fall within that pattern where we don't pay attention to some of the violences and the historical contributions that Black women have made, partly out of ignorance, right? That one of the ways that white supremacy and internalized hatred perpetuates itself is it becomes normalized, right? If you see Black women from afar, that they're always doing better, that they seem to have more opportunities, then you resent that. If you've been a victim some way of an interpersonal conflict, you resent that. But you have to take the moment back to say, does that personal conflict, does that individual relationship represent all Black women? Of course, the answer to that question is no. So, and I think that one of the conversations that Black women have to start having is, what does it mean to be successful within white supremacist systems? And I'm talking specifically about middle-class Black women here. What does it mean to be successful in white supremacist systems where they become the primary subject and Black men and Black communities fall to the wayside? I think that in every conversation we have about Black people, we have to center that in terms of the interests and the wills that white people have in perpetuating one segment of us against the other. So we have to understand that nobody succeeds in a white supremacist society without at least some buy-in from the way that the society is organized. So that means that anti-Blackness is not just internalized, is not just structural, it's the actual goal of the society that we live in. So it means that we need to be very suspicious of the kinds of ideas and languages that are being supported by white people. We need to be very suspicious of the people that white people are saying, we choose this Black person, we approve this message to describe the rest of Black people. So we're going to talk about the ways that Black men and Black women relate to each other. We have to start with the suspicions about the kinds of ideas that they've been taught about each other. And I think that that's not a conversation that's happening very often.
Well, on that note, I knew this was going to be epic. It was more than epic. I'd like to thank both Ms. ZaZa Ali, thank you so much. Much appreciated for coming on. Also, thank you very much to Dr. Curry for making himself available again. These two individuals are not easy to get a hold of. Believe me, they're positive, productive people, but because they're doing positive things. I want to shout out everyone who watched the conversation live. I can't get everyone's names, and I couldn't get to all the comments. There were so many, but Leon, Minnie, Tachi, Ryan, Gemini Blue, who, as I said jokingly, is the PR agent for Ms. Ali. There's also Tish, Josh, Brian, Love. There's some other people who jumped in at Wilford. And yeah, so that is about, if I missed your name, my apologies, but there were so many. Oh, also Ms. Ali, let me just, someone says hello. Jessica Walker from Boot to Boom says hello to you, Ms. Ali.
Peace, Queen.
All right. So I am Dr. Vibe here. I'm host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of epic conversations, and I'm the host of epic conversations like this one. And if you want to touch base with me, the best way is Twitter at DrVibeshow, and then email address dr.vibe@thedrvibeshow.com, and also the website address www.thedrvibeshow.com. I would encourage you, I'll say I'm Google-ish. Just look me up on your favorite search engine and you'll find me. I encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Have over 200 conversations on there. There'll be at least one. That'll be great. So, as always, I like to say, you're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles, and you're a solution for someone's problem. I'd like Tommy and Dr. Ali, if you can stay on just for a minute after we finish, it'd be appreciated. And I will say, God bless, peace be well, keep the faith, and remember, sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. Thanks again for watching either live or on the replay. Really appreciate it. God bless.